Do you know the story of how Taylor Sheridan picked the cast of Yellowstone? Reportedly, he'd created the roles of Rip Wheeler and Casey Dutton for the actors who played them. That's right, he'd created the role of Rip for Cole Hauser after watching him perform in Good Will Hunting. Likewise, it was Luke Grimes' role in American Sniper that earned him a spot on the Western as Casey. The characters have now become central figures on the show, but at the time when Sheridan was still writing the script, he'd only had one character thought out. That was John Dutton III. Now, everyone can agree that the role was made for Kevin Costner, and while Sheridan would agree no one could have embodied it better than Costner, it wasn't necessarily made for him. This isn't to suggest that he didn't want Costner. If anything, Sheridan and Costner had been acquainted for a long time, and the series creator always had the Hollywood icon in his sights. Still, he needed to put a lot more thought into who would play the lead. Oh, and if you'd asked if Costner wanted to play John Dutton, we'd tell you that he signed on for the show before he'd ever read the script. That's just how much he trusted Sheridan to write an epic Western. But let's talk about a parallel universe now, one where Kevin Costner didn't play John Dutton. Yellowstone would have ended much earlier. While Kevin Costner has starred in everything from romantic dramas to horror movies, he's become closely associated with Westerns. His breakthrough role was in 1985's Silverado, and in later years he starred in and directed the acclaimed Dances with Wolves, played the titular lawman in Wyatt Earp, and helmed the underrated Open Range. Okay, and in this alternate timeline where Kevin Costner isn't John Dutton, Yellowstone also isn't on Paramount. In fact, before Sheridan pitched the script to Paramount, he'd gotten the green light from HBO, his first choice. The only stipulation in front of him was to cast a big-time Hollywood icon as John Dutton. The name Robert Redford ought to ring a bell. Kevin's fans are probably having a humbling moment right now because there is someone who could have played John Dutton almost as flawlessly as the man himself. So, Sheridan went to work and pitched the show to Redford, who was itching to make his television comeback. Yep, Redford agreed to become John Dutton. So, wait. If everything was working as it should have, why was Yellowstone on Paramount with Kevin Costner as John Dutton? Armed with Redford's commitment, Sheridan returned to HBO for his expected green light. It wasn't forthcoming, though, because after the initial shock of letting them know the movie icon said yes, they said, "We meant a Robert Redford type." Sheridan states the network was always a little cold on the project, with a network VP telling the show's creator, "We're HBO, we're avant-garde, we're trendsetters. This feels like a step backward." When it became clear the series wouldn't be moving ahead with HBO, Sheridan shopped it around to other networks. Redford dropped out of the John Dutton role during the transition from HBO to Paramount, during which the showrunner went to networks like TNT and TBS before it finally found a home on the Paramount network. It debuted in 2018 and within a few years became one of the biggest shows in America. This still doesn't match with the bold statement that suggests the show would have ended much earlier if Redford had been cast as the lead. Okay, think back to the last major Redford production in history. The Old Man and the Gun would come to mind, right? Maybe his 2019 cameo in the MCU, too. But since 2018 or 2019, Redford hasn't been in any major productions. Not because he's not a well-sought actor or anything, but because the legend announced his retirement in 2018. That was the same year that Yellowstone debuted with Season 1. More Yellowstone lore for all of you! Sheridan had initially planned the show as a 10-episode limited series. Still, its success warranted a couple more seasons, and Redford would have agreed to a couple more. However, it'd be a fair bet that he wouldn't have stayed for any longer than 3. So if you thought Kevin Costner's exit sent production into a complete overhaul, imagine what would have happened if Redford had quit acting altogether after 2 or 3 seasons. Sam Elliott was also top choice for John Dutton. This one shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. Of course, Sheridan wanted Sam Elliott on the show. Look at him! Elliott's the sort of guy who screams Western aesthetic. But would you believe that he actually loathes Yellowstone? It seems almost a little hypocritical since he is a part of its spin-off series, 1883. However, Elliott claims that he doesn't like the parent series in itself because And these are his words, it reminds him too much of Dallas. Elliott's disdain for Yellowstone aside, the actor claimed that he'd been familiar with Sheridan's work long before he started the show. He stated that he'd been a fan of Sheridan since his time on Sons of Anarchy. When the two of them eventually met, they struck up a friendship and Sheridan offered him a role on Yellowstone right then and there. It's worth noting, though, that Yellowstone hadn't received the green light from any studio during this time. Also, we don't know if Elliott was pitched for the role of John Dutton, although that'd be a fair guess. Still, the actor passed on the opportunity and claimed that he was looking for something less Dallas-like. I passed on it, but during that time he made that offer to me, we started talking, said Elliott. Those conversations led Elliott to joining the cast of 1883, and though he's still not thrilled with its connection to Yellowstone, he told Taste of Country, Yellowstone is all over 1883. We're tainted by Yellowstone, which on some level I can't stand. He's also effusive in his praise for Sheridan. This guy we're talking about is a brilliant writer. He's a genius of some sort, he said. Kevin Costner almost passed on the role himself. Lastly, did you know that there was a brief moment when the star of the show himself considered walking away from the franchise before he, ended up doing so anyway? That was back when Costner first signed on and realized that the show was meant to be a series and not a movie. As it turned out, Costner loved the idea for Yellowstone, but thought he just signed on to play the lead role in a film. If you know the guy, you'd know that he loves a long movie. Almost all of his biggest hits clock in at over 2 hours. So the idea of a very, very long Western movie didn't faze him. Ironically, what did cause some concern for him was the fact that it would be a series. At the time, it was a 10-episode limited series, and that was probably what persuaded Costner to sign onto the project in the end. He claimed that he went into it hoping for the best and came out of it with nothing but fond memories. You kinda have to look at things again, he explained. He eventually signed on to play John Dutton on Yellowstone, though remained tight-lipped about his change of mind. I have my own internal reasons why I ended up doing it, but ultimately, there's that window of opportunity where you gotta jump creatively, and so I did that, he continued. The decision proved positive for Costner on both a professional and personal level. I'm happy for the show and everyone in it, he said. Costner would eventually walk away from the show in its 5th season, ahead of the finale. This did cause a temporary hiccup with the writing team having to speed up the ending. Originally, Sheridan had planned a Yellowstone ending in Season 7. Nothing to fret over, though. According to Luke Grimes, Kelly Riley, and Cole Hauser, who finished filming and can confirm that everything's going exactly as it should. Luke claimed that while it felt weird not having Costner on set anymore, it didn't cause a huge shift in the storyline. Kelly claimed that she was told the show's probable ending back during conversations with Sheridan in 2018. That probable ending became the actual ending, and apparently, Kevin wasn't all that needed. Meanwhile, Cole claims that the finale might just be one of the best finales in television history. Some pretty bold claims coming in from the Yellowstone Ranch, but the show has given us many, many great storylines over the years. Who's to say it won't go out with an epic finale too? What do you think? Let us know in the comments.